Imagine a young soul, vibrant and overflowing, always extending a hand, always seeing the best, even when it's hidden in the deepest shadows. This young soul gives freely, generously, sometimes even putting their own brightest aspirations aside for the well being of others. But then imagine another soul, dark and all consuming, one that only knows how to receive, how to consume, and how to take. And when these two souls inevitably cross paths, the consequences can be devastating, leaving behind not just emptiness, but a stark, silent warning about the perils of pouring your light into a void. Hi, I'm Dev,
And I'm Cam.
and you're listening to Criminalish, a true crime podcast where two best friends trade stories ranging from the wild and wacky to the downright messed up. So today I will be telling Cam about the murder of Savannah Page Gold that took place in Jacksonville, Florida in August of 2017. Have you heard of this case before, Cam?
I don't think I have.
Okay, good. But there is a slight possibility you have heard of this case, but potentially by a different name that I'm not going to get into yet. Because full transparency, JCS Criminal Psychology on YouTube has already covered this case. And his video was recently recommended to me, which is how I remembered this case. And when I rewatched his video, he didn't really know how the case ended because at the time of his release, the court case was still ongoing. So my ADHD started ADHDing and I had to close the loop. Thus, I was like, I'm 45 minutes into figuring out what happened anyway. Sounds like it needs to become a podcast episode.
That sounds right to me. And yeah, once we get into the details, I'll definitely let you know if something starts sounding familiar. But honestly, I consume a lot of true crime. Some might say too much. So some of the details that are floating around my head are a little bit murky anyways.
That sounds about right, friend, because again, I was casually, specifically on a Tuesday afternoon, watching JCS. So,
Right.
clearly I do this for more than just this podcast.
Exactly. But before we get into the case, what we drinking?
So, girl, Cam already knows, but the people at home don't know. I am taking a little bit of an alcohol break for some health reasons. And as such, Cam has been very supportive of it. So for the next couple of episodes, we're going to be doing some mocktails, or Cam may bring a drink for herself, but I personally will not be drinking. But to start off today, I wanted to give Cam one of my favorite little mocktails that I have been drinking at home. So here we have my black raspberry mocktail, which is some lemon and lime juice, and then the blackberry sparkling ice water, because it just kills two birds with one stone. Add the blackberries and the sparkling water all at the same time with a couple of fresh blackberries on top. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I already had one earlier. They're in season. They're so good. But yeah, cheers, girl.
Cheers. This looks really good.
Yes, but she's been a go-to of mine to get me through. And before we get into today's case, I do want to extend trigger warnings for violence against women as well as substance abuse. So to get into today's case, Savannah Page Gold was born on April 26, 1996, to her parents Daniel and Sherry Gold. And she also had a brother named Chris. And she was described as an absolute light. Savannah especially loved playing lacrosse, art, sewing, and dancing. She was also described as an excellent student and attended La Viva School of Art for middle school and Douglas Anderson School of Art for high school. But more than anything, Savannah loved her family and loved people. Her obituary actually stated, quote, "She was an amazing soul and influenced everyone to be a better person. She was a natural caregiver, true empath, animal lover, and avid sports player," end quote. Savannah loved playing lacrosse, and by all accounts, she was very talented at the game. And this talent, combined with her excelling academically, led to her earning a scholarship to the prestigious Savannah College of Art and Design, better known as SCAD. And this was one of the facts that made me extremely happy because in a past life, SCAD was one of my dream colleges. And I know exactly how hard you have to work and how talented you have to be to get into that school and especially get a scholarship. So clearly, Savannah was an incredible artist, was an incredible player, as well as doing very, very well academically.
Right. Growing up in Georgia, we definitely hear a lot of great things about SCAD or Savannah College of Art and Design, and know that a lot of talented people go in and come out of that school. So kudos to her for getting in.
Absolutely. However, as Savannah's academic life is growing and beginning to move in a very positive direction, her personal life has taken some massive hits. Her mother, Sherry, had been diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, presumably in 2009, when Savannah was just 13 years old, and was battling a very aggressive disease all through Savannah's high school career. And when it became time for Savannah to go to college and leave her mother, she couldn't do it. Savannah went on to turn down her dream scholarship to SCAD so that she could stay home and care for her mother. And this is extremely beautiful to me because it is said that Sherry was Savannah's best friend, and Savannah wanted to be by her side through all the ups and downs of her illness. So she put her academic goals and dreams on hold to prioritize this limited time she knew she would have with her mother. And Savannah takes on the full caregiver role for her mother. She cooked, she cleaned, and Savannah actually took her mother to all of her doctor's appointments. And while I could not fully confirm this, it seemed like Savannah felt like her taking on the caregiver role at home allowed her father to be able to continue to work and do the things that he needed to do for the family while Savannah would be at home taking care of her mother.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I was about to ask, I was like, did I miss something about the father? But that does make sense. I also know that, especially in the US, it is very expensive to be sick. And unfortunately, even when you have insurance, it will only cover it to a certain extent. So I can imagine too that there was probably a large financial burden on Savannah's family as they dealt with her mother's illness.
Absolutely. So I think it's incredibly beautiful that Savannah decided to do that. However, even though Savannah was staying home to help her family and take care of her mother, Savannah still had a sense of independence about her life. She maintained a job and was a dedicated server at the Bonefish Grill, a seafood restaurant chain where she had worked for almost 2 years by August of 2017. And she was known for being, quote, a dependable employee, always on time, and customers loved her because she was always on top of things, grabbing refills before they were even asked for, end quote. Savannah was going to give you that 12 out of 10 customer service experience.
Right.
But not only was she an amazing server, you could just tell that Savannah was an amazing person who deeply cared about everyone around her. As many people have reported that she often spent her money on others or even gave it away when she thought that someone needed it more than she did. So much so that, according to Savannah's mom, she actually worried about Savannah's financial well-being because she was giving money so freely and generously. But it wasn't just the money that worried Savannah's mother. Savannah's caring nature also meant that she tended to be drawn to what her mother called, quote, broken people, end quote, a quality that understandably made her mother nervous, as she feared that Savannah might get hurt by those who didn't deserve her compassion, which I think is a very motherly and realistic fear because unfortunately there are people in this world who will just take from you and feel perfectly comfortable giving you nothing back.
Right. And then too, being so young, you have to learn how to spot those people. And unfortunately, sometimes you can only learn by finding those people in the wild, dealing with them, realizing who they truly are, and finding what you need to look out for in the future. And so being so young, probably not having as much experience with the negative side of those people, I can also understand the wariness from Savannah's mom's part because she's more seasoned, she's more mature, wise, she's seen more things. And so she's like, I know my daughter sees the best in this person, but I see the other stuff behind the curtain that she probably either doesn't see or is being covered up by the positive attributes of that person.
Absolutely. So all of this background and who Savannah is brings us to August of 2017. Savannah is 21 years old and is still living at home with her parents, as remember, she has taken on this caregiver role to her mother. But Savannah had the freedom to come and go as she pleased. But even though she had this freedom, Savannah loved her family. And Savannah was one of those people who regularly checked in with her parents so they wouldn't worry about where she was. And this included whether she was working late nights or out with friends. So on Wednesday, August 2nd, 2017, Savannah was scheduled for another late shift at the Bonefish Grill. Savannah put on her uniform and left her parents' home around 5:15 p.m. for her 6 p.m. shift and drove the familiar 10-minute route to work. And her parents didn't think much of this. It was just any other Wednesday that Savannah had to go to work. That is, until it's time for Savannah's shift to start. Just after 6 p.m., Savannah's father, Daniel, receives a call from the Bonefish Grill. And the Bonefish Grill is calling Daniel to ask where Savannah was because she hadn't shown up for her shift and nobody had seen her. And this was incredibly unusual and out of character for her because everybody at the restaurant knew that Savannah was incredibly reliable. And Daniel knew that she left the house at 5:15 and drove 10 minutes to get to work, meaning at the absolute latest, she should have showed up at 5:30, 30 minutes before her shift was supposed to begin. So Daniel is already weirded out about that. And then, mere moments after he gets off the phone with the Bonefish Grill, he receives a text message from Savannah. At 6:11 p.m., Daniel receives the following text, quote, "Hey, I just wanted to tell you and mom I met a really great guy and we're running away together. I love him and we're leaving tonight. I'll call you later when we get where we are going," end quote. And just like Cam, Daniel immediately clocked that something is off with this message. According to Daniel, the spelling was, quote, "all out of whack," end quote, and, quote, "looked really strange," end quote. Now, our audio listeners and Cam cannot see the actual spelling of the text, but I did put it on screen for the YouTube viewers. So if you would like to see what the actual text looked like, I will insert it into the YouTube video. So Daniel shows this text to Sherry. And Sherry also immediately clocked the offness of this text and also recognized that the misspellings in the text were uncharacteristic of Savannah, and the wording was also uncharacteristic. And just after her father receives this text, her brother also receives a text message from Savannah that stated, quote, "Hey, I quit. I'm leaving with my boyfriend. I can't do this shit anymore. I'm fine. Just wanted to get away," end quote. And it is after this message that Savannah's family came to one terrifying conclusion. This isn't their daughter. The daughter who turned down her dream scholarship to care for her sick mother would never suddenly abandon everything for a stranger. And their suspicions and worry only grew when they tried to call and text Savannah and she wasn't answering the phone. In fact, her cell phone had been turned off. She wasn't active on social media, and her family knew nothing of this supposed boyfriend. And according to her family, she left the house in what appeared to be very high spirits. There was no indication that anything was weighing heavily on her and that she was planning to do something drastic. Plus, she was wearing her work uniform when she left, which isn't exactly screaming, getting ready to run away attire.
Right. And like they said, my biggest thing is if she was unwilling to go to her dream school with a scholarship to stay and take care of her mother, how would she be willing to run off with some random person who her parents haven't even met? That was my biggest thing. That was the biggest red flag for me. And then also the misspellings. You know how I text. You would know if I started making a whole bunch of typos using the wrong words, it's not me. Because I don't do misspellings. Even if I have a typo, I'm going to correct it right in the next text. And also for her phone to be off, even if she did decide to run off with some random man, I would think she would still want to be able to keep in touch with her family just to make sure that her mother especially is okay.
Exactly. And so since you know it don't make any sense, I know it don't make any sense. Criminalish listeners know it don't make any sense. And Savannah's family for sure know it makes no sense. So of course, Savannah's family calls the police. And the police begin their investigation by retracing Savannah's steps to ensure that she didn't get in some kind of accident on her way to work. However, when they do that, they find no evidence of an accident, and instead, the police arrived at the Bonefish Grill and found Savannah's white Kia in the parking lot, unlocked, with her purse still inside. They also found that one of her tires had been slashed. There was no obvious signs of a struggle, and there was no blood in or around the car. So I'm sure we can all guess what happens next. The police tell Savannah's family that it's too early to file a missing persons report and stated that the family had to wait 24 hours because maybe she did run away with some stranger and
left her purse.
Yes.
Wow. Great investigative work here. And it's also not true, right? Like, you don't have to wait 24 hours.
No, you don't. You absolutely don't have to wait 24 hours. But what I think it was is I'm very familiar with this part of Jacksonville. I actually know exactly where this restaurant is. I haven't been to it, but I've been to that area before. Where that restaurant is one of the safest places in Jacksonville. And Jacksonville is a little bit crime heavy, namely due to it has a very, very high homeless population that, in my opinion, the city does not do enough to take care of. And so this particular area is so safe compared to the rest of Jacksonville. So I do think police are leaning into a little bit. There's no way this is a crime because this is one of the safest places you could be in Jacksonville. And it's broad daylight because it's 5:30 p.m. in August. It's broad daylight. There's no way a crime happened at 5:30 on a Wednesday in the safest part of Jacksonville.
Do we know if they at least had surveillance footage from like the Bonefish Girl?
We're going to get into that, friend.
Okay. I can see that line of thinking, but if I'm an investigator and I know that this family has just lost contact with their young daughter, and this is very out of character for this daughter, and the family believes that somebody is texting them from her phone, but is not her, that's raising a million red flags for me. I'm like, you know what? At the very least, let me go ahead and look at the security footage. Let's see if we can figure out what happened. Do like an hour of investigation, at least to start, because these first hours are very crucial.
Exactly. And I won't ascend my soapbox for too long, but step. In my opinion, this is actually what harms investigations when people don't just take it seriously from jump. I don't understand what this whole 24-hour BS is. It doesn't matter that she's an adult for the reasons you stated. We got texts from who we can all know is not Savannah. And right after we got those texts, she shut her phone off. She didn't go to work. Again, uncharacteristic of her. She's abandoning her family that she real life gave up everything for.
Right.
She gave up her own future for her family, and now she's just going to abandon them?
And leave her purse in the car, but she ran off. Wouldn't she need money?
Exactly. Left her purse in the car, but still had her phone.
Right.
Come on now. Now descending. So, despite the asinine advice from the police, Savannah's family's like, yeah, bump that. We're looking for Savannah. So her family, friends, and coworkers immediately began their own search, and within a day, they were passing out flyers and posting missing signs. Now, to give the police a little bit of credit, despite telling the family that they could not make an official report, the police were informed that there are security cameras outside of the Bonefish Grill. And of course, the staff is happy to offer this footage to the police. The police confiscated the footage and begin to review until they find when Savannah's car pulls into the parking lot. And when they do, they find something that is incredibly bone-chilling. So, the footage showed Savannah pulling into the parking lot at 5:30 p.m. At 5:31 p.m., she got out of her car and walked to a silver Chevy Malibu, and reportedly, she approached the driver's side window as if she knew the occupant. She stood at the driver's side window for a nearly 15-minute conversation until, at 5:45 p.m., Savannah got into the back seat of the Chevy Malibu. And just 14 seconds later, the car began to shake sporadically, as if a struggle was occurring inside. The rear door swung open 3 different times, but was immediately and forcefully shut each time, suggesting that someone, potentially Savannah, was trying to get out, but was being prevented. The struggle lasted only 49 seconds until the vehicle suddenly stopped moving. A few minutes later, a tall, dark-haired man got out of the Malibu and walked over to Savannah's car, which was approximately 20 feet away. He can be seen leaning inside the car, and though it is unclear what he did, it is presumed that this individual grabbed Savannah's phone out of her car, and once he was finished, He slashed Savannah's tire with a small knife. The man then returned to his Malibu, got inside, and drove away at 6:04 p.m. Savannah was still inside, and Savannah was never seen exiting the car.
My first question is, do we know how close they were parked to the entrance of Bonefish? I'm just wondering how no one else saw this.
Now, I will say I have seen clips of the surveillance video. The entire footage was not released to the public. And in my research, I was never able to find the full video. In all honesty, I kind of don't even want to watch it. But I was able to find people talking about it. And from the screen captures, if we're looking at like the front door and like parking segments, Savannah had parked maybe 3 or 4 parking rows back from the door. So there is a possibility that somebody didn't see them from the restaurant because she had parked and this other car had parked pretty much at the back of the parking lot.
Okay. That makes a little bit more sense. I'm still wondering how no one just getting out of their car saw that. But again, them being that far from the entrance, it makes a little bit more sense. But also from the perpetrator's perspective, very risky.
Absolutely, it's risky. But I also think it's important to remember that is one, they are parked at the back of the parking lot. And what police believe to be the actual violent instance is only 63 seconds long. A minute and 3 seconds, I absolutely could see somebody getting out of their car, walking away, maybe seeing the car rattling or something, but not thinking much of it and walking out. And then the event is over.
Yeah.
63 seconds is it.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine being the family and seeing that and your mind is going crazy trying to figure out what could be going on inside there. And then also from Savannah's perspective, I'm sure we're going to get into it a little bit more, but from her perspective, just going up to somebody you thought you knew and could trust and getting into a car and shortly after that being attacked.
Absolutely. It's terrifying. So, of course, I'm sure you can guess that this footage became the primary piece of evidence for the case. But the police decided to keep the surveillance footage confidential from the public and any potential suspects, as their strategy was to prevent anybody from potentially altering their alibis or their stories if this evidence had been known. So, over the next 2 days, investigators would return to the Bonefish Grill and conducted several brief interviews with all of the staff at the Bonefish Grill, asking general questions about when they last saw Savannah and if they had any helpful information. And based on these interviews, police have narrowed down to 3 potential suspects. So they knew they were looking for someone who drove a silver Malibu. So the police ran the names of the 3 suspects through the Florida Motor Insurance database. The first suspect didn't have a license, so they're out. The second suspect owned a 2001 red Jeep Cherokee, so they're out. But the third suspect, a man named Lee Rodarty, was the registered owner of a 2012 silver Chevy Malibu, an identical match to the vehicle seen on surveillance. Now, before we get into what happened next, let's learn a little bit more about Mr. Lee Rodarty. So, in August of 2017, Lee Rodarty Jr. was 28 years old and worked as a culinary manager and head chef at the Bonefish Grill, where he had worked for almost 5 years. He was described as a popular member of the team who was, quote, rising fast through the ranks of his chosen profession, end quote. He was well known for his charm and charisma. However, he was also described as a, quote, fairly quiet guy, end quote. Now, Lee himself would later claim that he, quote, didn't have it the best growing up, end quote. He stated that both his parents, quote, used a lot of drugs growing up, end quote. And he stated that his mother specifically was, quote, addicted to methamphetamines, end quote, when he was younger. This traumatized Lee so much that he claimed that his personal history with his parents' drug addiction made him fearful of, quote, hard drugs, end quote, like heroin. Remember this, it will be important later.
I'll just say I didn't need parental history with methamphetamine and other hard drugs to be fearful of heroin. Maybe that dog, Tim McGruff, whatever his name is, just did a really good job of scaring us away. But I'll just say I didn't need my parents to be addicted to those kinds of drugs to be afraid of them.
I don't think most people do, but Lee brings it up specifically.
Okay.
Like, I can't do the hard drugs. I'll smoke a little weed. I'll do some shrooms every now and again. But that hard stuff is scary, and I got childhood trauma.
Got it.
So now that we know a little bit more about Lee, how does this relate back to Savannah? Well, several coworkers told police that Lee and Savannah had been in a secret on-again, off-again relationship for the last 8 months. And why was this relationship a secret? Because this relationship was against company policy. Managers were not allowed to date or engage in relationships with any subordinates. And this wasn't a suggestion. Lee could have been fired for violating this policy. And to add even more mess to the mess, Lee had a girlfriend named Chelsea, whom he had cheated on with Savannah. And after his last breakup with Savannah, he had gotten back together with Chelsea, making the situation even more complicated and toxic at work. So the police learned all this, and they finally learned that Lee was not scheduled to work the night of August 2nd, meaning his presence was specifically to see Savannah.
That sounds like a very messy situation, especially y'all have only been dating for 8 months and you're already on again, off again. Very, very messy. Even aside from all of the corporate messiness and the professional messiness of it, just he got a girlfriend, he break up with the girlfriend, get with Savannah, break up with Savannah, get back with the girlfriend. It's all too much. And you said he was 27, 28?
28.
Sir, please be so for real.
Come on now. So, armed with all of this knowledge, on August 5th, 3 days after Savannah disappeared, police devised a plan to bring Lee in for questioning because they don't want to tip him off that they've started to figure out that he's somehow connected to this case. And y'all already know, I love when police do a little bit of tomfoolery and trickery to get some people to come in, because they can't just go and ask him to come in for questioning about Savannah. That's going to tip Lee off that they know that something is up. So instead, they trick him. Earlier that day, during his shift at the Bonefish Grill, Lee was arrested on an outstanding traffic warrant, which he did have a history of driving on a suspended license. But throughout my research, I found that apparently this is a very common tactic that police use to bring in suspects without immediately revealing the true intention of the investigation. So, after Lee is brought in and placed in an interrogation room, Lee was left alone for 90 minutes until Detective Ray Reeves, who had interviewed him previously about Savannah, entered the room. And even on the potato police interrogation quality camera, you can see that Lee is spooked. His whole demeanor changes. He is freaked out the moment he lays eyes on this man. And his demeanor wouldn't be the only thing that would change several times over the course of this interrogation. So the detectives begin the interrogation fairly calmly with just asking some general questions. That is until the detectives abruptly bring up the cuts and scratches on Lee's neck and wrist. Now, Lee claims that these wounds were self-inflicted due to emotional duress and stress, and even brings up sleeplessness over Savannah's disappearance. And yes, it is as ridiculous as it sounds, but it does get worse. So after this, detectives ask Lee, "How do you know Savannah? What is your relationship with Savannah?" And Lee gives the most wandering, just won't stop talking answer I've ever heard to a question in my life. Because Lee confirms that they had an on-again, off-again relationship for the past 8 months, despite him having a girlfriend named Chelsea when he first met Savannah, and later breaking up with Savannah to return to Chelsea. And then, for reasons I have never quite been able to figure out, while talking about how he knows Savannah, Lee accused Savannah of heavy drug use, specifically stating that she was addicted to heroin and pain pills. He goes on to state that he initially broke up with her because she started getting, quote, heavy into them, end quote, referring to drugs. He even claimed that she even ended up going to the hospital for a few days due to drug use and had to detox. And he even alleged that she brought heroin to his house, which scared him due to his parents' past drug addiction. Now, I have no idea why he decided to take this route of throwing Savannah under the bus because it genuinely makes no sense to me whatsoever. Because it's like, do you think that if you tell police that Savannah's a bad person and that she's strung out on heroin and she's doing drugs and she's crazy irresponsible, that they'll suddenly stop looking for her or the investigation will change? Like, what's the point of this? They just asked you how you knew her, and we've gotten to, well, you know, she was strung out on heroin and everything else.
Yeah, I got a couple thoughts here. One, I actually think potentially what was going through his head is he maybe didn't know about the surveillance footage. So he assumed, oh, if I tell them she is addicted to a drug like heroin, that potentially opens up the suspect pool. It's not just people she worked with. It could be whatever person she's getting her drugs from and whatever other social scene she's involved herself in. That's very dangerous and contains people who are more likely to want to hurt somebody.
That's a good point. I had never thought about that.
But I also think it's stupid because saying things like she had to go to the hospital, that's very easily disproven.
Right. And documented somewhere.
Right. But this brings me back to a point I made when we were chatting earlier about something totally unrelated. Sometimes when you just let people talk, they just talk themselves into a hole. So sometimes it's better to ask an open-ended question or ask no question and just let them continue talking and talking and talking and see what they say.
No, for sure. And that is very much the approach that the detectives took with this interrogation. I actually feel like they didn't ask him a bunch of questions. They just opened the floor to him and was like, tell me more about that. And he would just talk. So to get back into this dumpster fire of an interrogation already, detectives asked Lee when was the last time he saw Savannah. Now, this is where things are going to get a little bit interesting. Because during his initial police interview 2 days earlier at the Bonefish Grill, Lee fully denies being in the Bonefish Grill parking lot the evening that Savannah disappeared. In fact, he claimed that he hadn't seen Savannah in several days, 3 weeks to be exact. And of course, police now know that that isn't true. And I'm sure Lee has figured out that he's being questioned right now. And it's because the police know that his initial statement isn't true. So now he changes his story again and is like, yeah, I wasn't entirely honest with you all. When I said I hadn't seen her in 3 weeks, I actually did see her the day that she disappeared. So he eventually admits that he saw Savannah on Wednesday afternoon, August 2nd, 2017, at the Bonefish Grill. When pressed for more information about this, Lee claimed that he drove to the Bonefish Grill hoping to talk to Savannah because apparently he had heard that she was, quote, telling a lot of people at work that we had hooked up and that I was her boyfriend, end quote, which would jeopardize his job as a manager by dating an employee. Lee then continues his story and alleges that when Savannah got into his car, she told him she had, quote, just did some heroin and I'm a little paranoid, end quote. According to Lee, the two of them got into an argument because, according to Lee, Savannah had told him that she had detoxed and that she was clean now, so he was upset that she was doing heroin again. And Savannah allegedly stormed out of his car saying, quote, fuck you, you're a piece of shit, end quote, and that she was going to continue telling everybody about them. He then claimed he got out of his car and slashed her tire to warn her about telling people about their relationship. According to this version of events, after Savannah got out of Lee's car, with her phone in hand, she walked towards the main entrance of the Bonefish Grill. He claimed he got back in his car and watched her for 5 minutes before an older green Ford pickup truck pulled up and picked her up, driving off with her. And he concluded by stating that this was the last time he saw her. Now, before we talk about how this story doesn't make a lick of sense, can we also talk about how it doesn't make a lick of sense for you to hide the last known location of a woman that is now disappeared from the police?
Right.
Why didn't you say anything if you were the last one who saw her?
And also, I know he doesn't know about the surveillance footage at this point, but I don't understand how common sense didn't make him think that there was surveillance footage. You also work at the restaurant. I would think you know that they have cameras.
Come on now. It's so nonsensical and stupid. We're going to get into it, friend, but Lee's not a very smart man at all.
Yeah. And also, I get drug addiction is real, but aside from Savannah just not seeming like the type of person who was actively addicted to heroin, it doesn't make sense to me that somebody would do heroin right before they go to work.
Absolutely. And this was actually something that I was doing in the course of my research. Again, this
Heroin?
just a little bit, take the edge off. But this is where my Google search history is going to completely get me in trouble, because I Googled, I was like, does heroin make you paranoid? Like, what are the symptoms and side effects of heroin? And first of all, the first thing that popped up to Google was the help is possible. It gave me this, I think it was either the suicide hotline or the drug abuse hotline. That was the first thing that popped up in Google, which, like, I appreciate that.
Valid.
Appreciate that. But the next thing that popped up was like the symptoms and everything. And it was like, heroin doesn't make you paranoid. Heroin makes you feel like you can do anything, because heroin's whole thing is it relaxes the body and removes all pain sensors so that there is this euphoric sense that is like the pinnacle of life. That's what heroin does. So if she was actually doing heroin, she wouldn't have been paranoid. And this is the thing that I think that Lee doesn't understand. And he doesn't actually know anybody who does heroin, because meth makes you paranoid. And he does know people, according to him, who have done meth. Heroin doesn't make you paranoid.
If you're going to accuse somebody of being a drug addict, at least make sure you know information about the drug.
Come on now. Make sure you know what you're talking about.
Right.
So police allow Lee to run with this story. They're asking him for more details and more questions of like, okay, well, you saw her get in this truck. Which way did the truck go? Like, what happened after that? They're getting detailed information. And so just after giving Lee just enough rope to hang himself, they pull the floor out from under him and tell him that they know that everything he just stated was a lie. And while he initially states that he's sticking to his story, like, no, I wouldn't lie to you, like, this is what happened, police then reveal that they had surveillance video footage from the Bonefish Grill parking lot that completely contradicted his story. Most importantly, they tell him that the footage shows that Savannah never got out of his car. Quote, she never got out of your car. Video cameras don't lie, Lee. End quote. So what does Lee do? He changes his story again.
Right. He's just a storyteller. He's a creative. What can he do?
Right. He's a head chef, that creativity is flowing.
Mm-hmm.
So now he's stating that the two of them did get into an altercation in his car, and he claimed that Savannah slapped him and he tried to slap her too. But they both calmed down, and then they went back to his place and did drugs together.
So he was like, you're doing heroin. I'm so mad. Oh, you tried to slap me. I'm going to try and slap you. You know what? No, we should calm down. You know what we should do? Go do drugs together.
Exactly.
Skip your shift. It doesn't matter. Let's go do drugs together.
Let's go do a little drugs.
I assume there were lots of crickets in the interrogation room.
There weren't quite crickets. There were just 1,000-mile stares. And the detectives just keep pressing Lee further and further, because the stories are making less and less sense the longer the interrogation goes on. And Lee offers one final option. And he tried to suggest that Savannah might have overdosed in his car. Now, this was a possibility that detectives presented to him to try to get him to admit to a lesser crime. If you watch interrogation videos, the police are always going to be like, well, what if this happened instead? So you become less culpable, essentially, so that you change your story, and then you'll continue to change your story after that and prove that you're completely unreliable. But after relentless pressure and strong accusations from the police, Lee Rodarty eventually confessed to killing Savannah in his car on August 2nd, 2017. In his confession, according to Lee, Savannah was hitting him, and he, quote, squeezed her neck and felt and heard a pop, end quote. He claimed that she wouldn't stop hitting him, and as a result, he wouldn't let go. According to Lee, this was a tragic accident born out of self-defense. He then stated that he took Savannah's body back to his house, where he, quote, burned her body in a self-made fire pit, end quote. He removed her work clothes and threw them away out of the car window the following morning. He later returned to the fire pit, dug up her remains, wrapped them in a plastic sheet, and tied it with duct tape. He then loaded her body into the trunk of his car and dumped her body in a retention pond on the west side near Club Duclay Drive in Long Camp, less than 9 miles away from the Bonefish Grill. And the scariest part about this is that him throwing her body away happened at 6:30 in the morning of August 5th, 2017, just hours before he would be arrested, meaning he spent his entire morning before his shift at work disposing of Savannah's body. Later that same day, a JSO dive team located Savannah's body in that retention pond, and with his confession, Lee Rodarty was arrested and charged with the second-degree murder of Savannah Paige Gold. He was also charged with tampering with evidence and abuse of a dead body.
Yeah, I don't really buy the self-defense argument, especially because we saw almost a minute of the car shaking, and you slash her tire after you accidentally kill her.
And took her phone and texted her family.
Exactly. It's not giving self-defense. It's honestly not even giving second degree.
It's not. But one of the things that I have found very interestingly, in a lot of cases where I felt like, specifically in Florida, they should have gone for a first degree charge, they typically don't. Because one of the things that's very interesting is I do think that Florida is very conservative when it comes to charging. Because in the state of Florida, you can still get life for second degree. And in Florida, life means you will die in prison. There is no, 25 to life, 45 to life. That doesn't exist in the state of Florida. So for second degree murder, you can be convicted and be committed for life. So in that case too, it also lowers the burden of the prosecution to have to prove the malice and forethought that is needed for first degree. Because second degree just means that you wanted to kill this person and you did.
Yeah, that's very true. And it could be first degree from my perspective, but also keeping in mind what they're going to be able to prove in a court, it makes sense that they went with second degree.
Absolutely. And again, a big part of that, I do think, is because you can still get life in prison for second degree.
Mm-hmm.
If you couldn't get life in prison for second degree, I could see them trying to push more for a first degree. But since you can still get life and the burden of proof will factually be lower, I can absolutely understand it. So in the immediate aftermath of Lee's confession, an autopsy was performed on Savannah's body. And while the medical examiner could not determine the exact cause of death due to the condition of her body, they confirmed it was a, quote, violent homicide, end quote, even noting a fractured thyroid in the final report, which suggests a forceful strangulation, not some accidental pop. And you know, another thing that came out in Savannah's autopsy report was the fact that Savannah didn't have any drugs in her system at the time of her death, which obviously completely contradicts what Lee said about Savannah being high on heroin. And as a result of her being on heroin, she was hostile and aggressive towards him. And during my research, this part of the case just kept nagging me, his commitment to this accusation that she was on heroin, because it doesn't make sense in the context of her life. Right. She's a caretaker to her mother. She's incredibly reliable at work. She's always early. She showed up for her 6 p.m. shift at 5:30. She's always early. She's always on time. She's good with people. She's caring about people. I don't know about you, but most people I know who are strung out on drugs are not this kind of person.
Right. And if she were on drugs, Lee would not be the only person who would have noticed that.
Exactly.
Especially something like heroin.
Exactly. Multiple people would have known that she was on heroin. And multiple people probably would have been like, she's doing heroin. She'd be running off and doing whatever else. Multiple people would have been able to confirm that.
Right.
But the only person who is standing 10 toes down in that stupid, idiotic claim is Lee Rodarty. So, of course, after the autopsy report, after his confession, Lee pled not guilty to all charges. His defense team actually tried to pursue a stand your ground claim, arguing that Savannah's killing was an act of self-defense. Lee asserted that he feared for his life after Savannah slapped him multiple times, leading to him grabbing her neck and accidentally breaking it. This claim, however, was swiftly denied by the court, and the appeal of that denial was also swiftly denied, forcing Lee and his defense counsel to find yet another story to tell. But this motion and the appeal process forced the trial to encounter multiple delays. The trial was even so delayed that it was affected by the pandemic, despite Lee having been arrested on August 5th of 2017, because he was arrested at his interrogation. And this left Savannah's family to grieve for years and hold out hope for justice, especially her mother, Sherry, because remember, she has been battling stage 4 colon cancer throughout the entire trial process, and she continued to post about Savannah regularly on social media and make sure that her daughter got her day in court. And when that day in court came, it was not in the way that the family expected, because in February of 2021, Lee Rodarty took a plea deal and pled guilty to the second-degree murder of Savannah Page Gold. In exchange for his plea, the other charges of tampering with evidence and abuse of a dead body were dropped. At the sentencing hearing, Savannah's family delivered beautiful victim impact statements. Her mother spoke of Savannah as, quote, my sweet baby, my heart, end quote, and, quote, an absolute shining light in our lives, end quote, who had a full life ahead of her. Daniel Gold, Savannah's father, also spoke about the profound impact of the number 21, Savannah's lacrosse jersey number, a tattoo on her arm, the age of which she was killed, and the year her killer went to prison. He tearfully expressed his regret, questioning why he hadn't taught his daughter self-defense and, quote, how evil people can be, end quote, which, Daniel, is not your fault. It's not your fault that evil people took advantage of your child and took her away from you. The family also shared how their hearts had begun to heal thanks to the love and support they received from the community. And they thanked the police, particularly Detective Reeves and the state attorney's office, for their dedicated work in bringing Savannah home and holding her murderer accountable. Lee Rodarty was then sentenced to 40 years in prison with credit for time served since his arrest on August 5th, 2017. He will be approximately 68 years old by the time he is eligible for release. And tragically, Sherry Gold finally lost her battle with stage 4 colon cancer and passed away in September of 2024. Her obituary highlighted her resilience, showcasing how her spirit fought for 15 years. And I've talked about on this podcast before how much it saddens me and breaks my heart that parents die never knowing what happened to their children. And I don't know if happy is the right word, but I felt a sense of happiness that Sherry passed away, one, knowing what happened to her daughter, and two, knowing that her daughter's murderer is going to prison. And that gave me a sense of joy.
Yeah, I agree. I always feel sad, especially in cold cases where the parents go decades not knowing what happened, or even worse, knowing what happened and not getting justice. Thinking about Sherry Rasmussen's case there. And so even though this is a really sad story and I feel so sorry for Savannah's family that they had to deal with this, I am happy that Sherry was able to get the closure of seeing Savannah's killer.
Absolutely, me as well. But I want to finish this episode talking about Savannah. Savannah's caring spirit and vibrant life will forever be remembered by those who loved her for her deep commitment and love of her family. She was a bright and compassionate young woman, an absolute shining light, known for her selflessness and desire to pour into those around her. She was only 21 years old at the time of her murder. And that is the end of our story, friend.
R.I.P. Savannah. Definitely taken entirely too soon. She had her entire life ahead of her. Who knows what she would have been able to accomplish when she eventually went back to art and design school and honed her talents and skills even more. And also, Lee not only took a daughter, a friend, a sister. He took a caretaker. He took a shoulder to cry on. He took people's number one supporter. And so I'm also wishing the best to Savannah's friends and family and loved ones, because I'm sure her absence continues to be felt even to this day.
Absolutely. I too wish nothing but the best for the family. And I hope Lee going to prison for as long as he is going to be in prison gives you all peace. Because one of the things that also comes with him taking this plea deal is he cannot appeal. He cannot fight in court to get out earlier, anything like that. You took a deal for 40 years, you will be in there for 40 years. And I know sometimes that's the greatest piece of knowing that you don't have to keep going to court year after year after year because this person is fighting and refusing to take accountability for what they did. So I'm happy that you don't have to continue that process. And I similarly hope that that gives you peace as you work through all the emotions of losing Savannah.
So as we wrap up today's discussion, we are going to move into our segment called Today in Crime, where we'll describe a crime or a crime-related event that took place on this day. So on August 22nd, 1989, Huey P. Newton, the co-founder of the Black Panther Party, was killed in West Oakland, California. He was shot by Tyrone Robinson, a member of the Black Guerrilla family, a gang that had ties to the Black Power movement and one that Huey had reportedly feuded with in the past. According to reports, Huey Newton's last words before being fatally shot were, quote, "You can kill my body and you can take my life, but you can never kill my soul. My soul will live forever." Tyrone Robinson later confessed to the murder and was convicted of first-degree murder in 1991. He claimed the shooting stemmed from a drug dispute and was in self-defense, although police found no evidence of Huey Newton being armed. Tyrone Robinson also reportedly stated that he committed the murder to elevate his status with the Black Guerrilla family. Huey Newton was a prominent and often controversial figure in the civil rights movement and had co-founded the Black Panther Party in 1966 with Bobby Seale and served as the Minister of Defense. The Black Panther Party was known for its advocacy for Black liberation and self-defense, but had largely disbanded by the early 1980s. Huey Newton himself had faced various legal troubles and personal struggles throughout his life, including substance use. He would leave a powerful legacy through his work in advocating for community programs, fighting against police brutality, and demanding social justice. And that is what happened on this day. If you found this story interesting, leave a raised fist emoji in the comments.
He was right. You can't kill his soul, and it lives on
to this day.
Hello. Any other thoughts, friend?
Nope. That's all I've got.
Thank you to our listeners for joining us on this episode. I would also like to thank JCS Criminal Psychology, Annie Elise, and News4Jax for providing most of the material on this episode. If you'd like to check out photos related to this case, be sure to follow us at Criminalish Podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Listeners, if you like what you hear, be sure to tell a friend and leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to the Criminalish podcast. And if you're listening on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to our channel and feel free to leave any comments or questions. As always, stay nosy, my friends. Bye.